Streaming, broadcasting, live on Vimeo today. You don't have to find me there. Live right now on twitch.tv/lifttheveil411. I believe I have that address. I'm live. You don't have to find me there. Live right now on Twitch. That's why I'm using Vimeo for the first time. Doshi just got here. Okay, great. Positions. I'm Nathan Stoltman. I'm your host. That's my producer, Doshi, over my shoulder. Right on time for the prime time show. This will be posted on Lift the Veil Live, which is the channel I can post videos to at the moment. Lift the Veil is still down. This channel, subscribe to it, hit your bell, because this channel will be available for live streaming in 3 days, allegedly. And I will be live streaming when that happens, assuming it does, without any more strikes coming in this channel. Let me give you a better shot of Doshi, since that's what you tuned in for. It will be live just in time for me to cover another protest, and this one being the big one, the March for Our Lives rally. I'm going to be covering that in, here it is here. I'm going to be in Los Angeles, California. It should be a pretty major rally. They're expecting 500,000 people in Washington, D.C., but I think the Los Angeles rally will attract a lot of stars, not just movie stars, but also the child actors in this drama. Not that they're actors, they're real students, but they're acting out their political agendas on TV, and they might be doing it live in front of me. So I'm excited. Maybe I'll be able to ask some people some questions to support that kind of work. Truth matters. I'm hearing that more and more. I just heard that on the Richie Allen show. Truth matters. You can get shirts like that, and that supports the show. So you get something out of it. I get something out of it. Can go cover events at truthclothing.io, which is Truth Revolution Clothing. Let me show you our store. This is the products page. This is what it looks like on the website. And those are the 3 newest shirt designs. And there are more items in the shop. If you go to everything, mostly Real Truth Matters are the newest. And people are just writing me. I got a few emails today about how much people like them. So, and that I need to order more for more sizes. So anyway, check that out. Totally a bargain thing. Does good. Goes to a good place, which is Doshi's food dish. We are going to talk about Russian propaganda, anti-Russian propaganda, the new Red Scare. Oh, I'm sorry. If you want to donate for that kind of thing, rather than buy a t-shirt, paypal.me/lifttheveil, patreon.com/lifttheveil. Shilling over. Now, Russiagate, where there's an ongoing worldwide campaign against Russia right now for geopolitical reasons of some sort, trying to shut down that regime, attack Vladimir Putin and his regime right now. The latest news being that there was an ex-Russian spy poisoned by a nerve agent on a park bench with his daughter, both of them still in critical condition from what I understand. A Russian spy that defected to the UK. Apparently it was a Russian nerve agent, at least something developed by the Russians. And the response has been, without much investigation, definitely Russia. I'll tell you what Theresa May said. I'll play that video to start out, and then we'll get to the rest of the show. We'll get to hear from Boris Johnson and some other Muppets from the UK government.
These events. Mr. Speaker, it was right to offer Russia the opportunity to provide an explanation. But their response has demonstrated complete disdain for the gravity of these events. They have provided no credible explanation that could suggest they lost control of their nerve agent. No explanation as to how this agent came to be used in the United Kingdom. No explanation as to why Russia has an undeclared chemical weapons program in contravention of international law. Instead, they have treated the use of a military-grade nerve agent in Europe with sarcasm, contempt, and defiance. So, Mr. Speaker, there is no alternative conclusion other than that the Russian state was culpable for the attempted murder of Mr. Skripal and his daughter, and for threatening the lives of other British citizens in Salisbury, including Detective Sergeant Nick Bailey. Mr. Speaker, the House will recall that following the murder of Mr. Litvinenko, the UK expelled 4 diplomats. Under the Vienna Convention, the United Kingdom will now expel 23 Russian diplomats who have been identified as undeclared intelligence officers. They have just 1 week to leave. This will be the single biggest expulsion for over 30 years, and it reflects the fact that this is not the first time that the Russian state has acted against our country. Through these expulsions, we will fundamentally degrade Russian intelligence capability in the UK for years to come, and if they seek to rebuild it, we will prevent them from doing so. Second, we will urgently develop proposals for new legislative powers to harden our defences against all forms of hostile state activity. This will include the addition of a targeted power to detain those suspected of hostile state activity at the UK border. This power is currently only permitted in relation to those suspected of terrorism.
Okay, cue musical intro. Boy, that's brilliant. I do think some things in the world are real. Like you guys. You guys are real. Most of you. Most of my listeners, I think, are not just in my head. I think I have the metrics to prove it. You've taken a leap of faith today. What is that sound? And I apologize if you take offense. I'm a little offended myself. Welcome to our show. Welcome to the future. What it is, joining you live from sunny California. It's a beautiful day today. I'm your host, Nathan Stoltman. I bring you the news, the real news. When I can, we're going to try to give you the real news today. So Theresa May came to that conclusion after determining that this nerve agent was called Novichok, is something that was developed by the Russians during the Soviet era in the 70s, 80s. And that's what was used against this Russian spy and his daughter. And they asked Russia and concluded immediately that it must have been Russia, or that it must have slipped out of the hands of Russia into some other hands, and that Russia had some brief time period to respond and explain how they were behind the attack. They responded in a way that Theresa May and Boris Johnson found to indicate that they were guilty. Let me play you what Boris Johnson said since the nerve agent attack, and I'll read from you what he said as well. In fact, let me read you the article first. This is from The Guardian. Russian spy poisoning, smug response shows guilt, says Boris Johnson. He said, commenting on Russia's dismissal of the allegation, quote, "There is something in this kind of smug, sarcastic response that we've heard that indicates their fundamental guilt. They want to simultaneously deny it, yet at the same time to glory in it," unquote. He says they're glorying in it because he suggested Putin had responsibility here. Quote, "There is very little doubt in people's minds that this is a signature act by the Russia state, deliberately using Novichok, a nerve agent developed by Russia to punish a Russian defector, as they would see it, and in the run-up to Vladimir Putin's election." So they're saying that they used an item, this Novichok nerve agent, that was developed in the Soviet era and therefore would automatically be linked to Russia because they wanted a signature on it so that people know not to mess with Russia. Yet, at the same time, they're denying it. They're denying it. They're saying it's ridiculous, and they're referring it to an international agency and asking for evidence. You know what happens when you ask for evidence. Let me tell you what Gavin Williamson said, the defense secretary, about Russia's response.
It is absolutely atrocious and outrageous what Russia did in Salisbury. We have responded to that. Frankly, Russia should go away, it should shut up. But if they do respond to the action that we've taken, we'll consider it carefully and we'll look at our options, but it would be wrong to prejudge their response.
He says, frankly, they should just go away and shut up, since we won't listen to their response anyway. This is what Boris Johnson has to say about the Russian nerve agent attack.
Our quarrel is with Putin's Kremlin and with his decision. And we think it overwhelmingly likely that it was his decision to direct the use of a nerve agent on the streets of the UK, on the streets of Europe, for the first time since the Second World War. That is why we're at odds with Russia. This is a nerve agent, a Novichok, that was developed by Russia, that has been stored by Russia illegally ever since it was developed, and has now been used against a former Russian agent who was identified specifically by the Kremlin as the legitimate target of revenge and retaliation. Indeed, it was not long ago that Vladimir Putin was himself on television in Moscow announcing that such people should be poisoned. Thank you.
I can't believe, I mean, I guess it's like Donald Trump, but this guy's hair gets even crazier, and he looks like such a comic book character. I still can't believe he has a position of power there in the UK government and might be the next prime minister. I just can't imagine looking at the guy. We have Donald Trump, though, so it's still, his hair is even crazier than Donald Trump's, I say. That makes me a little skeptical of him. So there's a response from Boris Johnson saying basically that Russia definitely did it because they were sarcastic in their response. Not everybody is going for it, but the mainstream media narrative is that Russia is definitely guilty and they need to be dealt with summarily. Now, there is some question here. This is from The Guardian. The only thing is, this is an article titled UK's Claims Question, Doubts Voiced About Source of Salisbury, Novichok. At a ceremony last November at the headquarters of the world body responsible for the elimination of chemical weapons in The Hague, a plaque was unveiled to commemorate the destruction of the last of Russia's stockpiles. And this was by the Director General of the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, which is what Russia wants this evidence referred to. He said at the time, quote, "This is a major achievement," unquote. The 192-member body had seemingly overseen and verified the destruction of Russia's entire stock of chemical weapons, all 40,000 metric tons. Now they're wondering, well, if they were all destroyed, same thing happened in Syria. They voluntarily destroyed all their chemical weapons. They had them disposed of on a U.S. ship that was specifically designed to do that. And then they have been accused of a chemical weapons attack since then, not to mention the one in 2013 that nearly started a war. Does anyone dare to question it? Jeremy Corbyn does. Jeremy Corbyn under fire from his own MPs over his response to the Prime Minister's Russia statement. Let me tell you what he said. He said, quote, "So I think the right approach is to seek the evidence, to follow international treaties, particularly in relation to prohibited chemical weapons, because this was a chemical weapons attack carried out on British soil. There are procedures that need to be followed in relation to that, unquote. He highlighted an alternative possibility raised by May on Monday that the Russian state could have lost control of supplies of the nerve agent. Quote, in relation to the second alternative explanation, in other words, the loss of control of military-grade nerve agent, we highlighted today that, we have done repeatedly, the dangers of mafia-like groups and oligarchic interests in London and their links with elements within the Russian state, and that we need to take firm action on that. The Prime Minister said she was, quote, surprised and shocked by the spokesman for the leader of the opposition. A number of his own Labour Party members distanced themselves from what he was saying things like, quote, Putin's constant and shameful apologist might just as well stand aside and let the Russian ambassador write the speeches and brief the media himself, unquote. Sounds familiar to Russian bots over here. Let me tell you what else they said about it. People said, here, a former cabinet minister said, quote, can I assure the Prime Minister that most of us on these benches fully support the measures that she has announced, and indeed some of us think they could have come a bit sooner, unquote. The war against Russia. I'm going to tell you more about Novichok's, but there is, besides Corbyn, who is widely denounced, I guess, even within his own party, for just questioning the claims and saying that it should be referred to the appropriate bodies, which is also what Russia has responded with, is that it should be referred to the appropriate bodies. This gentleman here, Craig Murray, a journalist turned blogger, says he has a source that tells him something different. This is from a post called Of a Type Developed by Liars. I have now received confirmation from a well-placed FCO source that Porton-Down scientists are not able to identify the nerve gas as being of Russian manufacture and have been resentful of the pressure being placed on them to do so. Porton-Down would only sign up to the formulation of a type developed by Russia, in quotes, of a type developed by Russia, after a rather difficult meeting where this was agreed as a compromise formulation. The Russians were allegedly researching in the Novichok program a generation of nerve agents which could be produced from commercially available precursors such as insecticides and fertilizers. The substance is a quote-unquote Novichok in that sense. It is of that type. Just as I am typing on a laptop of a type developed by the United States, though this one was made in China. The statement, he says, from UK, USA, France, and Germany, all in agreement, uses exactly the same language. Quote, this use of a military-grade nerve agent of a type developed by Russia constitutes the first offensive use of a nerve agent in Europe since World War II. Here are some interesting facts. OPCW, that's the Organization for Chemical Weapons, inspectors have had full access to all known Russian chemical weapons facilities for over a decade, including those identified by the Novichok alleged whistleblower Mirzayanov. And last year, OPCW inspectors completed the destruction of the last 40,000 tons of Russian chemical weapons. By contrast, the destruction of chemical weapons in the U.S. still has 5 years to go. He mentions that Israel has extensive stocks of chemical weapons and haven't signed on to the Chemical Weapons Convention and is not a member of the OPCW. He suggests, and some MPs retweeted his claims, that this is another Iraq war weapons of mass destruction deception, and that doctors or the investigators at Porton-Down were pressured into linking this attack to the Russians. And there are some suggestions that it may have been MI5, MI6 themselves blaming Russia for an attempted homicide, apparently. He says Novichoks are just nerve agents developed from common chemicals. The Guardian helpfully wrote an article about Novichoks where there are a few interesting revelations. These things apparently can only be produced in Russia, that they're military grade. Well, the whole point of Novichoks is that they're made from regular substances so that they can't be banned, basically. And people might not know what this article says. It says the chemical structures of the main weaponized Novichok agents were made public in 2008 by Vil Marzianov, a former Russian scientist living in the U.S. But the structures have never been publicly confirmed. And the article concludes, and while the agents were invented in the Soviet Union, other labs with access to the chemical structures would be able to manufacture them too. So that is from The Guardian, the same outlet that's carrying the stories blaming Russia for this attack and saying there's current sanctions getting rid of the 23 diplomats and upcoming sanctions are going to be justified. I'm not saying The Guardian is explicitly saying that, but a lot of people ignore the facts or they don't look deeply enough when they might be being tricked by their politicians and the mainstream media. Now, that's what I have for you on the Russian poisoning. There are more stories coming up right now, though. For example, yesterday, the U.S. announced that Russian hackers targeted the American energy grid. Out of nowhere, the Trump administration on Thursday accused Russian government hackers of carrying out a deliberate, ongoing operation to penetrate vital U.S. industries, including the energy grid, a major ratcheting up of tensions between the two countries over cybersecurity. They've actually been sanctioned by the Treasury for doing so. Do you think they really hacked the American energy grid? Well, do you think they really hacked the U.S. election? There has also been accusations of Russia being behind the murder of a Russian businessman. That's just coming out in the news now. I don't have the headline up. But we're stepping into a major propaganda offensive, turning up the volume to 11 right now, and it behooves us to ask questions. We really have to challenge what the government is telling us when they're lying to us once again in the same way. I'm not from the UK, so they're not lying to me explicitly, but they are lying and leading the country down a path to what? War with Russia, Cold War with Russia. They say they don't want to go into another Cold War, but that seems to be the direction things are heading. So ask questions. Tune in on Twitch. These shows are available immediately after they're over, and there are pre-shows that I record that never make it to YouTube. So you could go there and go through the old videos and watch extra material if you like. If you just can't get enough, Lift the Veil. Thanks for joining me on Steemit. Steemit.com/@lifttheveil411. Thanks for finding me on BitChute, DTube, all of those places. I'm even on Vimeo right now with 0 people watching. Doshi says thank you. Doshi had a great show today, I think. Yeah? You were there. He was there. All right, everybody. See you at the next show. That is what it is.